So born in Germany, my family, half my family is from there, half is from the States. So very early years were there, and then we came to the States. It's my sister, my mom, and I, and we basically, moved around quite a bit. We started in Texas, we moved into California, we kind of stayed in California, as we kind of settled into Southern California. But my mother being very much German, barely speaking English. Unfortunately, her and my biologic father didn't work out, so we kind of went off on our own, and we did fairly nomadic until we settled in Southern California, and then kind of just stayed here for the most part. And then you know, uh, my mom met my stepfather. He was a very handy DIY kind of person, so this is maybe where it all started. But I've been very, very creative from early on. Um, I think your parents kind of see it where, you know, they can leave you alone for hours on end, and you just kind of fill your time with making things and drawing and all that. I don't know if that's necessarily the case these days, but you know, I, I'm maybe on the cusp of like that era where you didn't have anything, so you just kind of made whatever you're going to play with. So,
Yeah. Actually, that's an interesting observation because I was talking to a architecture teacher the other day, professor, I guess, and they're learning how to do basic physical model making, which is less common, but they're still
mhm,
doing it.
yeah,
And they were remarking that they have no hand skills. And I'm like, well, first of all, I probably most kids don't grow up using an X-Acto knife, but I think it is true that now a lot of them grew up
mhm,
more like with iPads and iPhones and things like that at this point in time, probably. So yeah,
absolutely,
they're
yeah.
not they're not doing things out of PVC pipe or cardboard or found objects. It's.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because the found objects was a thing. We didn't have a ton of money growing up, early on, so I would save the toilet paper rolls and make basically marble type of like roller coaster. So you drop the marble and it goes. It's like we used anything that we could find to. It was my sister and I. We kind of just like made up whatever it was. Um, and like growing up, you go hunting for new things that you can use to create. Um, yeah, it's just a necessity. It
Yeah.
wasn't. And I do feel bad to some degree because I notice a lot of younger designers come in and they're not used to. We like to create prototypes. We like it's that whole thinking through making. Your
Hmm.
brain will function different. You'll see new opportunities, and when you are only behind a screen, I think you lose a lot of the ability to kind of find those unexpected opportunities that will come up just from just be cutting and folding paper. Like even the act of origami, it's like that changes how you view things. You're like you can't see that and creating that in you know a computer format, which you can do, but it takes time, and you have to have that set end goal. Where in just thinking through making, there is no end goal. You're not sure what you're going to come up with, but like in Rhino or whatever format that you're using, you kind of know what you want to end at. There's no unexpected moves right there.
Mm.
So I definitely think that played a very heavy role in just kind of development of being like making art and making doing designs and being like that's cool, but what if we did this, like what does that turn into? um, and I think that was very much like growing up and being like without maybe all the financial backing, you did a lot of stuff by yourself in the sense of something broke, you got to fix it. So
Mm.
my mind is very much maybe in the artsy kind of creative realm, but growing up with that background, that type of family, um, I got a sense of really good sense of
It's the
like,
dog.
yes,
It's all
his
good.
um, sense of how to make things, how changing tires, doing all the
Yeah.
things like that. It's you got to learn to fix it because you can't buy a new one. Things.
I actually think that even small things like changing a tire or other miscellaneous tasks like that, they all kind of add up and help you understand how the physical world works and how materials work just innately. And that's a hard thing. I think it's a hard thing to learn if you haven't done some of it directly to really truly intuitively understand the limits of a material or what things want to be and not be. I mean,
Yeah.
even you go ahead. Oh.
No, I was gonna say I agree with that. Yeah.
I remember even in college, there were some students who had, more experience doing things like that and others that didn't, and would do collaborative projects, like group projects, which I always hated. But, we were making a piece of furniture or making something. There's always a few people in the group who are suggesting stuff. I'm like, that's mental. That's never going to work. Like, you have no understanding of how wood or metal or rubber or plastic or anything. You can't do that. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because even before I went and did my grad in architecture, I met a designer. I don't even know if he's an architect. I know he does a lot of buildings, but I think he's technically just a designer. Sebastian Mariscal, which I love his work. He does a lot of stuff down in San Diego, Mexico. I think he's in New York at this point. But amazing designer, very clean. And I met him, and I was talking with him about going to school. And he's like, before you do that, he's like, you need to work in the field. You need to work in the construction field. You need to know how things are built. Then you can go in and start doing, start learning the, architecture, start form, start working within that realm. But without the backing of, you're kind of just assuming things because you don't really know. You're being like, and now with, programs that are amazing, like Revit, so many construction like programs for building that are great, but you don't need to necessarily know,
what you're doing.
it kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's not, they're not blocks, they're very, but like in a sense they're being like, that's your wall and that's, which kind of wall do you want? And you're like, but then, so I think that's an important part that gets lost a lot of times between maybe what I would say is like paper architecture versus actually going out and building it. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. So, sticking with the story, you're growing up, you're making things out of toilet paper tubes and whatnot. But your bachelor degree was not in architecture, is that right?
no, it's graphic communication. So I ended up going to a small school called Point Loma Nazarene University, and I chose it because it was right on the beach, and I was like, well, leaving home, let's go somewhere cool. San Diego, I liked it. I'd only been a couple times. The first time I went to the school was actually the day I moved in, and yeah, it was dormer right on the beach, and it was great. I learned a lot there, but it was graphic communications and art that I worked in, which when you're going to school at that point, you don't really know, you don't know what you're going into, so you kind of find something that you're like, I found this appealing. Psychology was the thing that I started with, then I transferred to art and graphic communications. But the region I think really kind of left an impression and left a big old a bunch of money they have to pay back. But the area is great. You're right on the cliffs of San Diego, and you're right by the docks, things like that. So I got really interested in trying to find a job down by the docks. So I worked at a bar for a while, and then finally ended up meeting these boat carpenters and talking with them, and finally there was an opening. Unfortunately, the opening was one of the guys basically cut his hand really badly on a table saw, and they're like, we need help.
Oh,
We need more hands. And I'm like, okay, like let's get into this.
Literally.
Literally. And so there's this tiny shop in on one of the boat yards here, and that's kind of where I got into building more. Of course, like my stepdad was a framer, and so I understood like the basics of that, but getting into the details was something that really came from that area. So
what does a boat carpenter do?
Everything, kind of. So what happens for these boatyards is somebody will pull their boat into it, be like, okay, I need, I need this plugged, I need that cleaned. A lot of these people have, a lot of money to throw into these boats, so they're like, I want a TV that comes out of, I want this size TV. I want this large screen TV, but boat interiors are extremely small.
Mm,
So it would mean like, okay, how can we fit this TV into this? So a lot of times it would be like, all right, well, here's a sofa. Let's make it so it rises out of the back of the sofa. Or, you know, we they want to have a table for 6 people, but is kind of like working in a van. You're like, where do you make that work? So it was a lot of like the problem solving that I got used to, and the details, because they're pouring all this money into it. There was no good enough uh, like result
mm,
for what the shop leader would be like, well, I see that you did that, but it's not good enough, so do it again. um, because they're not going to pay for that, so we're not going to get paid. It became this thing to
mm,
be like, don't, get it to a point that's very good. That's the deliverable. And it was really interesting too, because we worked with so many different materials. It was like we'd be laying the wood on the top of the deck, and I was, the new guy and the young guy, so I would have to go and, sometimes squeeze into the holes of these boats to try to patch things. So working with fiberglass and resin, and then teak, and then, there's different types of polymers that you got to use. So there's a lot of different materials playing all together to make these, to work on these boats. So I think that was a very um, critical time for me, in the sense of like enjoying it, being out on the boat, being on the water, because a lot of these times you're working in the yard, and a lot of times, there's a boat, out at some, pier that you got to go to, and then you're out there working. Um, it was, I didn't get paid much, and I worked a lot because I worked, I worked that from 7 to 5, and then from 6:30 to 10, I went to and worked at a bar, and then
oh my God.
I would go out with friends and then go to sleep at 1. This is a 20-year-old's kind of
Okay,
like, yeah, this
okay.
is, I think about that. I'm like, there is no way like I could ever do that again. But yeah, did it for years. I ended up after I graduated, I went to a fire academy, um, because in high school I was like in one of those, young firefighter type programs, and I had a lot of friends within it, and I was like, okay, maybe this is the direction that I will end up going, because I really enjoyed it, and went to the fire academy. Loved it, honestly loved it. It was so fun. And in it, I started kind of seeing building types, be like fire travels, balloon framing versus platform. They're giving you basics of like, this is how fire travels. This is,
Huh.
what you should expect. And then talking to inspectors, it was a really kind of opening moment for me, um, within it, because I was like, I really love everything we're doing here. I don't really love the lack of, I'm not going to say the lack of creativity, but the outlets for, it's a great physical, there's a lot of thinking that you have to work through, like, but in the sense of pure creativity, um, it's not as prevalent, in the
Hmm.
fire industry, of course. Like, because they're not necessarily creating everything. You're understanding how things work so that you can work within the parameters and save lives.
Mm.
It's a great field, and I love the time so much. But I came out of it, thinking that maybe I should focus on something a little bit more creative, and I kind of got that idea that maybe working within buildings could be something that, um, maybe a next step for me. So that's kind of how I kind of spurred towards like thinking about, architecture, thinking about that a bit more seriously, thinking about building. So I started looking around for schools, but you know, this was
Mm.
I guess this was like 2004, 2005. Um, the travel bug when you're in your 20s is pretty strong. So I started traveling, seeing new places that I haven't been before, visiting family. So this became a thing for me for several years to kind of like be back and forth. I lived a bit in Brazil,
Oh,
love that, and it became a thing that I think really kind of shaped how I still view the world and society as a whole. I don't think
because of the traveling?
I think the traveling and like coming from another you know country and having family that you love that's still there, um, it shapes how you view your place in any location that you land. But the traveling, I think, is something that's essential for people, especially young people, to grasp and see the world from a different point of view, see different types of everything, different types of
Yeah.
structures, different type of people, different types of landscapes, different ways of thinking. So I think that was an essential part of like, 20th. I think you should do it, as you get older as well. That's one of the beauties of life. But when you're in that really formidable stage, I really do think it's essential. I try to tell my nephew to just go travel. Go travel. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to have it all planned. You don't need to know where you're staying at all the time. You're young. You're flexible. You'll meet
Right.
people. Like that's the beauty of it.
Wait, so for how long did you have, how long was the traveling period and what other places did you visit?
It was a few
Or you stayed,
years.
did you say you stayed in Brazil for a year? No, you were traveling.
Let's see. So I was in Spain for just like during school, but then I was in Brazil for about over three different times over about 2 years.
Wow.
So
Okay.
was there for 8 or 9 months over the because you travel, you come back and you work, you go back and travel,
I
you come
see.
back and
Okay.
work, that type of thing. So yeah, that was a really kind of growing stage. But when I came back, the last time from Brazil, and I'd broken up with the girl I was dating there, so um, the reason to go back kind of like diminished in that sense.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, what's the next step? And that's kind of where I was like, okay, maybe I should pursue a creative field. Started making art, putting on art shows, doing graphic design where I could find work, and then
Hmm.
started looking loosely at schools. Um, but again, living a San Diego 20s lifestyle for the most part, working hard, surfing a lot, going out a lot. Um, but there was the itch to be like, okay, well, what's the next thing you're gonna do? Like you know, you're gonna pursue art, or you're gonna pursue, what field? I had thought I was gonna go into the firefighting, but like I said, um, I kind of was feeling the itch to do more creative work, and that's
Hmm.
where I ended up going to the New School of Architecture, which is here in downtown San Diego. And that's where I kind of met a lot of the professors very like they all work within the field. San Diego's small,
Hmm.
in the sense the design community is pretty small. So once you get in, you start seeing the same faces, you start seeing the same kind of like um, artists, designers, architects, interior designers. They're all mingling in similar circles. So I met a lot of teachers that were all had practices, and that's where I met my two business partners. We were in school together, and it was one of those things that you guys, I'm sure, know. It's like you're working all hours, you're making models, you're staying up till 3, and you kind of look around the studio and notice there's certain people who are still there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are my people.
yeah, exactly. And then you see the work that's delivered. You're like, okay, like I saw
Hmm.
that person. They were in, a couple days, and I see the work they delivered. And you know, I think in school, being critical of work was something that like our teachers they would just literally rip your pieces apart if you could not back them up. If
Hmm.
you had a reason for something, you did that. What's your reason? Because I we see some projects that were like, okay, that looks kind of good, that whatever that was, but they couldn't tell the teacher that or whoever was critiquing it why they did
Hmm.
it. Then it was just arbitrary, and then
Hmm.
they would just get pulled apart based on that, not even the fact that it was like necessarily a bad move.
Mm.
We'd have the teacher that would take the piece and twist it and turn it upside down, and you're like, I think that's like a classic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like
Hey man,
teacher move.
stop fucking with my model.
Yeah, and it would suck sometimes because you're like, yeah, actually, it is better that you just did that. Like,
Yeah. It's been like weeks of not sleeping. You're like, damn it.
yeah, yeah,
um, Right, so going back real quick, because we have a lot of listeners of many different ages, but the kind of initial career trajectory is always fascinating. So, for how long were you working as a boat carpenter? And the traveling period you said was for a few years, and then it was architecture school.
yeah. So let's say I worked probably within the boat, within the carpentry shop for a couple years, probably two and a half.
Okay.
Um, the travel was right after that, so I traveled for a couple of years. And when I say travel, it's like travel, come back, work, and so it's
Right.
like that, kind of the transitory, not kind of dedicated to anything, but just kind of having fun and living that life of I don't know, vagabond.
Mm.
And then yes, like so by my latter 20s, 27 or so, was really kind of starting to think about it. I was making a lot of art at that point. I had come back to San Diego and didn't have a place, which was fine. It was like you have friends, you can always find a place. I met this really sweet lady. She had an antique shop. I became friends. She was maybe 60 something, and I ended up would clean her shop for her, clean the front of her shop. It was kind of right by the beach, and then she allowed me to stay for a while in the one of the back spaces of her shop. So it was kind of this interesting thing, and this is also a part of me. I really do enjoy like older pieces, older, uh, not knickknacks, not in the sense of just pieces, but like pieces that are well made, beautiful furniture, beautiful artifacts, beautiful art. I like old pieces. I tend to like gravitate a little bit towards these pieces that have a lot of character, or maybe
Mm.
took a while to make. Maybe they were before the fast production model of today. So I tend to like lean towards these antique shops and kind of like peer through them, and I have to really kind of hold back at times from always wanting to get something or buy something. Like it's I sometimes will be like, oh, there's a garage sale, but then again, like sometimes you find amazing things. I was skating around a year or two ago and found this beautiful old it's like a toolbox, metal toolbox, and open it up, and there's all these really beautiful metal working tools, like from maybe the 40s or 50s, but like just precision pieces. And I was like, hey, like how much for these pieces? And the guy's like, yeah, the whole thing's together for $50. So I put it on my skateboard and skated it home, and each of the calipers and measuring tools was probably, I don't know, $150, $200 a piece. So it's just I saved them because I'm like, these are pieces of art. So I took them to the
Mm.
shop and showed them to everybody, and they're all, they all geek off those things. So it was, you never know what you're going to find. But it was really kind of the precision of these old pieces that was
Mm.
kind of inspiring.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. So, so then your architecture school I think it's a 4-year program, the new school, if I'm not. No, it's a master's. So it would have been a
Masters.
three, two and a half, three, something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it was a 3-year program. And
Gotcha.
yeah, it was very good. Like I said, you get what you put in. If you're gonna work hard, you meet a lot of people. It got on good platforms with the teachers, so that when we graduated unfortunately in 2011, and
Hmm.
as you guys probably know, it's like every firm that had 40 people went down to 4 people, and there was just like not there was just really nothing. There's nothing. San Diego, like I said, is small by itself, and then when all the firms kind of shut down, you're just like, all right, pivot. Working nights, just at bar, and then during the day, a lot of our teachers would start reaching out to certain students to be like, all right, well, would you want to help build this thing for me? Basically, they know they're going to get free labor,
Yeah.
but that's fine because I mean, graduating from school, you really have nothing. You have nothing below your belt in the sense of like, I've made this thing. You can show
Hmm.
projects, you can show like, I made these beautiful boards, I concepted this, I worked in the shop to make this. Those are all great. They're telltale signs of what you might be into. So like even today, I will go to the different schools, for their grad shows and be like, all right, let's see. I want to see what the new people are thinking, like what's going on, whether it's product design or if it's the actual architecture program, and I like seeing what they're developing, um, because it could be just a little piece, but you're like, okay, I like the way your mind's thinking about that. That's different. That's unique. I'd rather see unique, something abstract that like, what if we did this? So started basically we started kind of working with teachers. So I had befriended the couple guys in school, um, and sometimes when you need help to be like, all right, well, they wanted us to build some staircases. Do you guys want to come over and help? Or, somebody's got a garage. To be like, hey, let's build this in your garage. And um, so this became a thing for us. And, it was like using everything from pallets to tires, cutting the treads off to make, flooring for, some school or changing the pallets and covering with something to create, a background for like a kids area. Yeah, we were kind of
Hmm.
doing anything. Um, and it was fun in the sense that we're just creating based on whatever was getting pushed. Like one of the guys is from Lancaster, and there's a big fair up there, and they had asked us if we could make a trebuchet, and we're like, at first we had to look it up. We're like, what is a trebuchet? And yeah, it's basically a catapult that uses weights to sling. And they were like, we want to throw pumpkins. We're like, absolutely, absolutely, we can make that for you. I think that was one of the things that kind of really got us on the ground, off the ground, is we didn't really turn anything down because we're like, yeah, let's make it. Let's see what we can do. YouTube, and there's so many platforms that you can learn stuff from. It became a thing where like, if we don't know how to do it, we'll learn how to do it. Um, so this happened, with something like that to be like, all right, let's make this trebuchet. It's got to, and we're thankfully, my buddy had a place off of a canyon, so we would load the thing up with rocks and put a pumpkin in
Test it
there,
out.
throw it in the
So
canyon.
wait, how big was this trebuchet in the end?
In the end, I mean, it probably stood about 12 feet tall.
Dude.
And yeah, had a basket that would hold about 300 pounds. And then when you released it, it would take that pumpkin and throw it about 200 yards. Like
Yeah.
it was very fun to make and test out. And like they loved it. Um,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
I don't even remember what we made. It was like, I don't know, probably a couple grand off of it. But like still, it's like, all right.
Cost of materials.
Yeah, it was on the website for a long time until like we're like, all right, we can take that off. Like we've done other things. Um,
They're like launching kids. They're
oh
like,
yeah.
you made a weapon.
Or grocery delivery, you
Um,
know.
oh, there you go. Yeah, yeah. It was one of the things that we didn't really think beyond. Okay, let's make this. Nowadays it's like, okay, well, you got to cover all the bases to be like, all right, what could go wrong and what could go right and what do we have to look at? What's insurance going to cover? What's this? Back
Yeah.
then we were just like, all right, let's do that. Let's do this. We were building these big doors. Um, Technically, before I started Tecture with my partners, right out of school, I worked oftentimes with this girl named Chrissy Beavis, and she's a, a really good designer down here in San Diego. She's also a race car driver and a stunt
What?
driver. Yeah, she's cool. Um, I had met them, and she was like, "Do you want to help me build some things?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And her shop was like this really kind of old school garage. So her and her boyfriend had their I forget what the race car was called, um, some specific type of car that they would drive around, a rally car. So they had a rally car.
Mm, jeez.
And so, but she would also be like, we're going to turn this trailer, this horse trailer, into a retail shop. And we're gonna build this like chopstick tree for this restaurant down here. So it was like she was kind of doing all this wacky stuff, which I definitely gravitated to. Um, but she helped me learn a lot just about like welding using different types of tools. We built these really beautiful doors that were like had weights that would allow you to move them because they weighed like 800 pounds. But with that also was the ability to understand, okay, where's the weight shifting to? Where's the point where it's going to break? What do we have to replace? Well, what's the maintenance on this thing? Just starting to understand, um, what could go wrong? What do we need to pay attention to? Because you know, a lot of designs could hurt you in a lot of different ways if they're not done right, like even outside of architecture, by itself. Um, so that was a really good experience for me. I worked with her for a year or so, just off and on doing projects before I started getting enough work with um, my two current business partners that we were like, okay, let's solidify this in some way. Um,
So, at what point was Tecture officially founded?
it was founded in 2012. I think it was like May of
Oh,
2012.
that's like right after you graduated then.
hmm Yeah, yeah. Um, it was the first couple projects were spaced out, I guess you could say, because we're doing these random projects for people, building stairs, building like stacked plywood, like interiors. And I was working with that antique shop owner, and she had met this woman who had bought this really nice plot, and she wanted to make a restaurant out of it, and the antique owner was going to kind of put a lot of the pieces in it, decorate it. And then I ended up meeting this woman. She's like, "Look, I need to move this fast. I need renders." She didn't like the architect that she had brought on, and she knew that like I just graduated from school. So she was like, "Do you want to give this a shot?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. We can do this." Um, so we kind of jumped into it, and it was this old house that had this beautiful patio in the kind of the heart of Pacific Beach here in San Diego, and we kind of just went into it like we went into every studio project, just like full bore. What do we need to do? Let's create floor plans. Let's think about the mood. Let's like, what do we want to preserve? What do we want? What's going to be the focal point? So we worked with. I brought one of my teachers in as the GC. He's also a friend of mine. His studio is beautiful too. His name is Dominic Oudier, and his studio is Oudier Studio. Um, he came in as the GC, so we worked together, and then this is where my teammates came in, and we created this place. We're like, okay, let's make it with big sliding wood doors. We're going to take all the wood that we demo out of that. We're going to pull the nails out. We're going to create the door system out of it. The door system is going to roll on this track. It was very kind of this industrial meets like modern kind of like beach feel. Where, like everything's going to be open. Um, we big green wall, preserve the fireplace. Um, yeah, it was a great project. I mean, we used the wood from the interior to do the formwork for the
Mm.
planters, so it had this really kind of nice undulation off of it. Um, but that was the first project that we're like, this is under Texture's name with Udia Studio, and this was like the kickoff. And we did the whole project out of a garage in North Park, which is a few miles away. Um, but it was interesting because I was biking. Like at the time, it was like I worked, outside of North Park at night, so I'd bike there to the garage, work all day, and then go to work at night, and then go to the space in the morning to make sure everything's getting worked on properly, working with the different subs. It was a huge learning curve for us in the sense of like she was actually putting money into it. We had produced renders. This is what we're working on. We all kind
Hmm.
of wanted this project to go well, because you don't typically just get you know, a blank slate like that, right out of school to like create a piece that like you appreciate. And she was open. Granted, we didn't know how to bid anything at that. One of the things I guess they didn't really teach us that well in school as how do you bid things properly. So we kind of looked back at it and be like, how much do we make for this whole time? I mean, we probably made $1 an hour, maybe, in the
Yeah.
end. But that wasn't even, the worst. We look back at some of the other projects that we had done. We're like, I'm pretty sure we made like 13 cents an hour,
Yeah.
to get these
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but in the end, it's like there wasn't any work,
Yeah.
anyway. So it's like, okay, we're getting these projects. Like even if it's like, somebody wants a back bar for their space, or they want whatever. We're like, okay, let's do it. Let's get creative with it and like see what we can produce. Um, but that was one of the jumping off points, and that was our first kind of major project of being like, all right, like we got the full build out of this. We got to kind of dictate the landscape, and we dictated what the sign looks like. We built custom
Mm.
chairs and tables for them. We built a custom green wall. We preserved these big beams and made lights out of them. It was like we got to get really creative with it, which kind of I think set the stage for how we started looking at every project from there on out.
Interesting. Interesting. The let's talk about the founding of Texture, the other partners, and did you all know? Did you have a clear vision that it was going to be an architecture, interiors, and furniture object shop design build practice, or was it fuzzy? The picture of it fuzzy.
Very, very fuzzy. Yeah, extremely fuzzy. As in, we don't know if this is actually going to work. Um,
Yeah.
the Our inspirations, my partners, Carl Price and Slade Fisher, we all really liked similar projects in school. We all really liked like Olson Kundig. We thought Tom Kundig, was just everything he was building was amazing, and like he was doing these rolling carts that are on train tracks that have to move, and then the hardware that they're making, and just like the big wheels that like will open the whole side of a building. um it was just beautiful. It's like that's kind of where we're looking to be like, let's try to do things like that. So we leaned into kind of everything from making these back bars that could shift, or you making seating that would transform into something else. And that was something that we were like, okay, it's the yes and kind of idea to be like, yeah, we can make a table, but we can also make a table that, whatever, has a
Hmm.
cool little slot for your ice buckets. Or we could make this like where your glass for wine will sit perfectly in this chair. Um, so I think in school it was like, you had those classes where it's like, make a chair, make this, but how do you make this better? Um, and I think that really kind of informed how we looked at everything to be like, all right, well, here's the dining space. How do we make this really unique? How do we make this feel better? Like, do we change the seating? Why don't we change the seating? Just again being critical of all the things to be like, you know, you don't really land on the first idea. We kind of run through a lot of situations, and then kind of sift out to get to what the best version is. And we still do that same thing in the studio. I like I said before, is like, um, we, our teachers were so critical in school, and we really pulled that in. Not critical in a bad way. There's nothing personal about this, and that's something that we have in the studio. It's like, don't take it personal, as much as you might want to, because you love this design and you worked really hard on it. But if it doesn't work, if it's not the best option, then you got to rethink it. Like what is the best option? How can you make it better, or how can you make it fit within the parameters that are reality versus, and reality could be budget, could be timeline, it could be,
Hmm.
the location. So this is something we still kind of bring into the studio, and we reinforce with our team to be like, you know, we want all your creativity. We want the creative ideas. We want you to show us like you, but you also have to work within all these parameters, which sometimes can kill ideas and kill these things that you really want to do. But again, the parameters you have to work within.
Yep. Go ahead.
So how big is the team today? Do you have like, and well, I guess how big is the team, and like does each team member do everything from design to fabrication, or do you have different like mini studio within the office?
Hmm. Well, when we started, we did like everything. We were doing the woodwork, we're doing the steel, we're doing the renderings, we're doing the sales pitch, we're making the contracts, and that lasted several years. And we everybody in the studio wore a lot of hats. One of our first designers, she came in, and we're like, okay, well, yeah, we'd love to have you work with us, but you have to make your desk. We didn't have desks at the time, so like, you have to build your desk. So we gave her everything. We're like, here's what we built. This is the style. So you get to it, like, and that'll be your desk. So it was like that kind of idea to be like, she would go down, we would design, and then she would go down, and work, in the wood shop, and we teach, this process of like learning new tools, learning new materials, learning how to work with them. So it's like everybody had their hands in kind of everything, and then we go install. And, installation's a whole other animal, and thinking through installations definitely requires you to be flexible and think on your feet, which, when you're sitting behind a computer and you're thinking about how, like, if you're even thinking about how it's going to get installed, it's a very different thing than being, on site and being, oh, that wall's not actually flat, and that's not level, and you got to work around those things. So at this point, most people kind of have their regions because it's just more efficient that way. I run the creative kind of design department. One of my partners runs operations. His goal was to make this a functioning company, and how can we streamline things. That's more how his brain works. And then my other partner runs the shop, and he has several guys under him that are very specific. One of the girls who runs our woodworking area, like, she focuses on that. She might still have to go on site, but she, for the most part, will focus on that. We now have an upholstery department, and the girl who runs that part of the team is oftentimes on site. She also does woodworking, and then we have an install team. We've got a finishing team. So now, again, everybody jumps around a little bit, and I kind of force the design team to get out into the shop more often, because a lot of the pieces we make are artistic, and sometimes they need the eye who created it to kind of go out there and be a part of it, and we want them to have that as well. I would hate if our studio just became this, like, you sit there at your desk and you work and then you leave. But so even our technical designers, we tell them, get up and go out into the shop, and you know the details of this project better than anybody. So you should be out there looking at it as it gets produced, and anytime there's a question, we want you there to be a part of it. And a lot of times even, they'll go on installs and work with the install team just to make sure everything's going right. And I think it is a very helpful thing in the sense of them learning, the process of drawing and the process of making it, and then the installation of the piece. To think through all of those pieces until the end. We say it's from concept to completion. So it's, be understanding, create the thing, work through it. Design can be a game of telephone if not properly, monitored. And this happens with, I guess, any type of building. Where you come up with that idea, you sell the idea. The GC comes in, the subs come in, everybody's doing that, and be like, they might have really good ideas about how you can make that better, but it changes the form. By the end of it, you get something that's very different than what you had envisioned. And so we try to control a lot of that, and try to develop our ideas so well that, like, when we deliver, we're showing the client, like, okay, here's what we showed you. This is the piece, and this is what we delivered, and this is how tight. When we were able to maintain that, this is what it turns into. Which we're proud of that. We're proud of that we can show those to be like, this was what it was, and this is what you got.
Do you ever take on projects where you guys are only let's say, the designer or only the builder?
Mhm. Yeah, I think this was something that we learned going out. We're like, we're only gonna build what we design, and
Yeah.
but like again, like I said, San Diego's small, and we're friends with so many different designers, and we basically any profit that we pulled off any project, we would just shift into buying a tool, something that would make life easier. Initially we had this really when we were in the garage, we had this really rickety, um, very small saw that one person would have to turn it on and hold it while the other person would push the wood through it because it would just like rattle. It was
that
terrifying.
sounds safe.
Yeah, it was so scary. So we're like the first when we got enough money, it's like yeah, an actual table saw. We're like this is amazing, and now it's evolved so that now we have these panel saws that are just like they're
Mm.
so nice to work with and they're so much safer. And it's like um, there was the process of being like all right, like moving forward, and now that we have these tools and we put the effort and time into to getting them, you know, other designers and friends and architects would come and be like, hey, can you help me build this? And we realized that the square footage that the shop takes up, you know, as much as we love things that we design, like this is a lot of money to put into a space that you have to cover the cost of the warehouse. You got to cover the cost of the tools and the electrical. And so we're like, we just opened it up. We're like, yeah, bring your projects to us. What we do is we'll do design assist. So an architect
Hmm.
or an interior designer, or, anybody can come to us and be like, this is the idea that I have. Can you help me, bring this to life? And we're like, absolutely. So we do this quite a bit now. Like I would say probably 40%, 40% of what we have in the shop is designed, to a project that we're doing, that we're starting from concept.
Hmm.
And then, 60 to 70% right now is just a lot of people coming in to be like, hey, I want to build this art feature, or I need an art feature. Or we had a great designer come in and he wanted us to build the whole restaurant out. We're like, okay, like it doesn't go on the design side of our website, but it definitely goes in the fabrication side because he had these
Hmm.
beautiful details, and we're like, okay, so we definitely work around that, and we like that because it brings so many new challenges to us,
Yeah.
new possibilities of working with different materials, and in the end, we there's a lot of problem solving, and we like the puzzles of being like, you want this, and I get that it's hard for a lot of people to necessarily work their way through kind of backwards to be like, how do we build this?
Mm.
And that's where we kind of step in. We're like, let us help you with that. We'll do the design assist. We want you to achieve the vision you have. We can help you do it. We have, woodworking. We got steel. We got aluminum. We got fiber lasers. We've got upholstery. We've got an amazing finisher and a finishing shop now. And then we've got a team of installers that, are very skilled at working with different things. There's installers that if you're a framer, you get great at framing. You're fast, you knock it out. It's kind of one thing that you're doing. It changes based on configuration, what you have to build. The pieces that we make and the pieces that we install, I mean, are drastically different based on
Hmm.
whatever the piece is, whatever the parameters. We're doing a lot of lighting installations, a lot of hanging pieces, and then we're doing, a straight up kind of, restaurants. We're doing, so it really does vary, and that's a nice thing for us to do is open that up.
Yeah.
Is there anything you guys don't do?
Yeah, I was trying to think. Yeah, somebody came to us and they're like, they want glass blown art, circling this piece, and it was a casino. I'm like, okay, like we don't, that's such an art,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
but
that's a very, very specific.
yeah,
Yeah.
but Barrio Logan, where our shop is, it's this very creative hub in San Diego, and there's a lot of makers. It's part of the community. Part of the community is commercial, and part of the community is residential. And the commercial, a lot of artists pushed down here because they could get warehouses, and that's, I mean, the whole reason we're down here as well. So there's like a lot of different makers around here. So we knew a glass blower that's a couple blocks away, and we brought it to her, and we did a lot of prototyping and worked through her. And we'll definitely use outside sources for sure, like people we trust, because there's our shop it's 25,000 square feet, which in the reality of a lot of fabrication shops is pretty small. For us, we're stoked. We've got so many nice tools that we get to work with, and ever since starting, doing from the boat shop that I worked at, it was so small. It was probably 200 square foot shop, and we would have to feed the wood in through the door to put it on the table saw because like the shop was so small. And they wouldn't allow you to work on any of your projects. So I would skip lunch so I could work for 15 or 20 minutes before all the guys left on my own projects. Now we have this really nice shop that, like, once you're trained on the tools and you want to come in, that's just something that we will allow our teammates, because they're all creatives in some form. So it's like, you want to work on that, you want to build a rack for your truck, you want to do whatever. Yes, you got trained on that, you're certified on that, you can come in, of course,
right.
Follow the rules of the shop, but we don't want to stifle in any way the creativity of the team.
Yeah. How much of the mock-ups and testing is part of, kind of like the more special fabrication items? Like, do you have to do a lot of testing and iteration before you nail it?
Yeah, definitely. Project specific, but yes, it's like we make prototypes because we like making prototypes, but we have to make prototypes. One, we have to see how things work, especially if it's a material or something we're not completely, familiar with. We did this one recent project, and we had to stack different materials, and so we put them together. But even, MDF to acrylic to plywood to, it's like they all adhere differently. So that was one thing that we had to test several kind of processes to see how that works. And then when you mill through it, we have a CNC, you mill through the layers. How does each one work, and how does the bit work through it? So it's definitely a lot of prototyping. It's part of every project that goes through there. And I mean, another part of it is, showing it to the client, showing it to the designer, being like, is this kind of what you're thinking? Because this is the process. And really, we do find a lot of, we call them spiders. So the things that are going to creep into your project that you don't see coming. And this unfortunately happened because we did this early on. We did this really big sign for a school up in LA. And we stacked layers of acrylic and put images on each. So it had this really kind of like three-dimensional feel. And it was a great project. The piece was maybe, 6 feet tall by 12 feet long or something like that. And we get a call a couple weeks later, and they're like, oh, we love the piece. It's really great. We appreciate it. It lights up really well. The donors are stoked. Thank you. But there's spiders in it now. And we're like, what spiders? And they're like, yeah, there's a lot of spiders inside of it. And we're like, oh, okay. So we drive up there and we look at it, and we hadn't sealed the frame properly.
Oh.
And these little spiders had began building nests all through the piece. So it looked like it was just getting smoked out. So we had to go.
A Stranger Things sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like, well, we're like, we did that because it's almost Halloween and we wanted you to have it. No, but we cleaned it, sealed it properly, and it became a thing in the shop that we're like, all right, watch for. But what are the spiders? What are you not thinking about as you develop this piece? And that's where the
Is it?
prototyping really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it hard to budget for fee when you do so much, prototyping and kind of like building something new every time, and also schedule, right? Like, do you have to kind of like, expand the schedule a little bit just to feel like you're not under pressure to come up with the right way to do things, or are you able to manage, tighter time frames?
Yeah, those are, I mean, very important. Great question. And we used to shoot from the hip a lot. We'd be like, yeah, we kind of eyeball things and be like, yeah, we can do that for that price. And we really, we got, as you said, like would say, we got our butts handed to us a few times, just in the sense of, spending too much. Basically, we paid to make someone else's project, or and then the timeline's 100%. Early on, we would just be like, look, we got to work. We're gonna work until this thing's done. So you're like, we'd be working until 3 in the morning, getting it ready, and then we'd work on site late. This was when it was, a very small crew, and we weren't really doing what you legally should or do within a business. Now we're at the point where like, okay, like we gotta build this out properly. We don't want to stress our team. We have to. So it goes from this kind of like, and now we have people that really work within the team that are specialized. They're like, all right, you're looking at 2 weeks for woodworking on that. The install is going to take at least 2 weeks, and then you're going to have this kind of lift. So we really break it down now in the sense of like the schedule, what you're going to need, and kind of dial it in. In the sense of finding the price point, though, it is still tricky because there are the unknowns for the new pieces, the things that we haven't really done before. Looking at them and being like, okay, like, what's going to happen with that? Like, and the things that just go wrong. There's something's always going to come up that's like, hey, what happened? Like the wood, was still wet and we didn't know it, or we did this one really nice resin piece, and we got this resin, and it was a slow curing resin. But you could pour heavy, and that was the whole process. Resin, if different types, there's fast curing, and they get really hot, and there's slow curing that it still gets hot, but it's, it takes 3 days to set versus like a fast will set in 8 hours. So like, okay, let's get this slow curing resin, and we did this really big feature piece with it, and like had all this inlaid beautiful woods and all this. It was a very nice piece, and for whatever reason, it got too hot from the pores and cracked. So the whole thing basically shattered like glass. And resin, it's set now. It's hard. So we had to go in, cut all the pieces back out, resand them, and then, so that process threw a massive wrench into it. Thankfully, we had allotted time, just to be like, all right, this just goes into doing enough projects. You're like, give yourself more time. Like initially, we would just say, if you think it's going to be a week, just give yourself 3 weeks. But like we can't, put the cost of 3 weeks in there. But like we know there's something that's going to happen. Like let's just pay attention to that. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing on some of these projects to put a number to. So we've definitely done enough pieces that like we can be like, all right, some of it we'll look out from a square footage point of view to be like, all right, this type of art feature, this type of thing, you're looking at, 200 a square foot or whatever it might be. And we can start kind of understanding, especially for the interior design pieces, to be like, all right, well, this type of build out might be, with this range, or, we could go really fancy and it's going to go to this range. We've definitely gotten better in that sense. So shooting from the hip still kind of happens, but we definitely have dampers over here to be like, all right, let's look at these other pieces. Yeah.
Are you guys billing as a fixed fee mostly, or is it ever cost plus? Or does it depend on the scale of the project?
Yeah.
Both?
Yeah. It depends on the scale. depends on the client. Depends if like we're
Right.
bringing it in versus it's coming through someone else, and the complexities. A lot of times like designers, may bring something to us, and we're like, there's a lot of unknowns in this piece. We just redid this a project, and it was a building that was already standing. It was old, and they're like, well, can you give us like a fixed cost of what this will be? We're like, honestly, we can't. Like, we don't know when we get into this building
Yeah.
what's
Oh,
gonna
like a
come up.
remodel?
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
this could be a can of worms, and we just don't know. Um,
Yeah.
and thankfully, like we went into it, and we're like, look, let's like do a T&M, and we'll figure this out. We'll, give you like an honest bid. And once we have enough open that we can look at it, then we can give you like a more specific number. Um,
Yeah.
and that definitely kind of saved us in that sense. And I love this client, but they're like, okay, we opened it up, we saw it all, and they're like, now let's switch the kitchen to the other side of the building. And we're like, okay, like, are you sure? Because you got all your plumbing and all your electrical and all your HVAC and everything's running, is already here, you know? Are you sure you want to do that? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay, like absolutely.
Yeah.
We're T&M at this point. Like, let's work with you. Let's make it happen. Um, so yeah, but a lot of the pieces, in architecture, they're working within parameters. So they might just have this fixed budget. And they're like, what can we do with that? And, which is a nice
Hmm.
thing for us to come in and be like, okay, let's dig through it a little bit. Let's get you a number. You may not be able to use that material that you want. Everybody, you're not building out a teak, but like maybe we can do whatever. Quiet. We'll do something else. Like we'll figure out a way to get your costs down. And that's really where the design assist comes in handy. And we're
Hmm.
pretty proud of the fact that we can help these other pieces come to life just because we know the tools, we know the process, we know material costs. We're able to kind of like really work through with different architects and designers what their idea is and find a way to make it happen.
More, I guess, more on the business side of things. So, is the construction and build portion, is it a separate company from the design, or is it all under one umbrella? I would presume underneath the construction business.
It's all currently under the construction, the design build. We're
Right.
one entity, but it's a great question because we are at the point where we're like, okay, um, we do a lot of millwork, and millwork, for certain designers, it became a side thing for us to be like, yeah, like we'll build this for you, and if you want, we'll do all this millwork for you.
Hmm.
It's coming to a point where like we're doing enough millwork and we've got the tools for it and we've got the know-how that we're like we're we're starting to just do millwork projects. We're like, all right, like bring it in. Again, it's like we want to keep certain our clients that we work with happy. We like certain architects. We want to keep them happy. When they're like, look, can you guys just pick up all this? We're like, yes, we can pick that up. You've worked with us at this point enough. We've jumped through all the hoops with insurance and things. Like a lot of times they're like, look, just help us make this happen. It may not be glamorous work. It may not be the stuff we're putting on the website or anything like that. But, you know, nice, good millwork is something that, it takes time. It needs like, you need to know how to do it. So we're starting to look at these different avenues of the company and be like, okay, eventually we may split these off to be their own entity. The same thing is with the design, the interior design studio. My interior designer, they're great. They're good at what they do. But then there's the people who concept the art pieces, the real kind of funky weird things. They're sometimes different mind frames, and it's hard for that interior designer who knows spatial planning and knows the code and knows the egress and knows all that stuff to jump into, let's make a hanging piece that goes through the airport. And it's like that's a different type of
Yeah.
thought that is required there. So thankfully, like right now the design team is all together, and I do appreciate that because they get to play in different realms. But it may be this thing that eventually be like, all right, like look, you guys are interior designers. You love interior design. Let's just keep you guys in that kind of phase.
Hmm.
And like, so that's part of the growing of right now that we're going through to be like, all right, is it smart that we're all, one thing, or should we be
Yeah.
splitting it up and give those people who want to run and do the builds, like give them the form of just like have the GC portion and you run that and like, yeah. So this is definitely something we're considering and thinking about.
And remind me, how many people do you have now
We've got
across the two sides?
about 35 people, so pretty
Wow.
tight crew. And a lot of people jump back and forth. So if you're on install, you might be working in the shop, next week,
Hmm.
depending on the install schedule on the projects. And some people just really good at certain things. So it's like, all right, we'll just bring them back because we know they're gonna know this and they're gonna teach the rest of the team this, and then they can go back out and do what they need.
Do you find when you're talking with people in general, so let's say clients and non-architects, non-designers, non-fabricators, that the idea that your design build and everything can be done under one roof, so to speak, is very appealing to them?
We do, yeah. It, I think it's maybe the headache that it saves of being like, you know,
Hmm.
if you have to find the woodworker to, work with the steel worker to create the frames, and you have several different subs, and then in the end you need the upholstery, to work with it. We found that a lot of the designers and architects that we work with appreciate because they can come to the shop. We have a project
Hmm.
manager. We'll walk you through where is it at. Like, here's what it's looking like. This is, um, it's definitely cutting some headache out for
Hmm.
them. And again, I think we take a lot of the burden of that off of them in that sense. They're like,
Hmm.
once it's in our house, like it's going to be run through like our team. We're going to have the project manager working through that, and you're going to be able to talk directly with them. So you got one point of contact,
Yeah.
and then we'll kind of, whatever phase it's in, we'll like keep you up on it. So I definitely think it's a benefit, and especially for anything like products that people might want, like even the pieces that we do, like, it's kind of a nightmare when you have to, especially if you're prototyping something and you got to send it, to go get bent over there, but then you have to
Yep.
get the wood team to come in and it's not quite right, so you got to do it again. So, being able to streamline that and put it all in one place is definitely a benefit.
Yeah, I could see that. And the other thing too is that if you're doing, if we have a custom piece of some kind that it requires 3 or 4 different trade experts on it. It's a pain because you have to find the right people, and they're probably in different locations. And not only all that, but they have to be really eager to be part of this collaborative effort. And some of them aren't. They're like, I do my thing. I work on aluminum. Don't ask me about like anything else. Or I work on steel. Don't ask me about aluminum. I don't want that in my shop. You're like, okay, well,
Totally, and
and it becomes difficult.
yeah. And I think it's also part of the testing to be like, oh, if you're
Yeah,
trying to do anything slightly different and you take it to some
yeah,
of these subs, you're like, look, I'm not here to help you test this thing out. So thankfully we keep a very like kind of playful vibe about it to be like, all right, like let's try that out. Like we know time is money, but in the end, if we learn something from this that we can use again, like this
right.
is going to be beneficial for us. So we like the designers that like they'll come in and they'll be like, I'm not sure how or if we can do this, but what do you think about this? And it's you know it's time for us to look at it and think about it. But in the end, like it's beneficial because other designers or architects will leave being appreciative of the fact that we're at least open to that. Let's see if we can make it happen, and we'll give you an accurate number in the sense of be like, okay, I think it would take this,
Yeah,
to make this based on what it is. So you can either go back and kind of rethink how you want to do it, or we could change materials, or we could do this or that. But it definitely, I think it is a benefit. One of the benefits that we can offer them to be like, let's think through it. How can we make it happen?
What about 3D printing? Has that come into the fold at all? For initially, I was thinking for prototyping purposes, but I guess now more complex 3D printing methods that use final materials.
It is. We actually just got one. It's a fairly small one. We're still prototyping with it. And like what I was saying before is like the projects would bring the new tools. So if we're like saying like, oh, this would be a lot easier if we had, a brake and be like, all right, how much does a brake cost? Like, okay, are we going to use it? Okay. And then that we would put money in to be like, all right, let's get a brake. 3D printing, it's like San Diego, again, it's kind of small. We're spreading out and we're doing projects, up towards LA, San Francisco, Austin. We're branching out and we're being able to do more. But it's always like the job has got to feed the tool in some sense, even if it's just a little bit. So it took a while for us to even get the 3D printer, but now we're like, all right, let's try new materials. And we've got a very like our digital fabrication team is fun in the sense that they're like, well, what if we tried this different material? Let's add color pigment to that. Let's try this. So now we're playing with it a bit more, and they're like, you know what, we need a robotic arm, and we're like, okay, like
Of course you do.
Yeah, of course you do. I'm like, we would love to have one, absolutely. It's like, okay, let's find the job that like this is gonna like pay for itself with, and then and again, it's the accumulation of talent, accumulation of capabilities, I guess, really does feed itself to be like, all right, well, now we can do that and we can do this. So, if you need something that plays in that realm, or, for our design team can now think to be like, all right, we have this tool now. Like, what can we do? Like, even the 3D printer that we have, we're using it in a project where it's like, doing these really intricate like designs where the pattern starts very open and gets more intricate, and then when you get to the it's like the macro to the micro, when you're right there, you're getting this amazingly delicate like pattern to it. So we're finally kind of integrating that into the pieces. So it's going to happen like that again and again, based on the tool, based on the process, and kind of based on the creativity of different people.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion, feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.